Hello everyone. I hope this day finds everyone in good health amid this pandemic. I have a few crazy stories for you regarding violent and unfaithful women. Stay tuned. My best friend caught his wife cheating this morning with his coworker and shot the man in his house. He's in jail and everybody's in shock. Help me out. Okay, first off, let me start by saying this is my best friend of 12 years. He's a great guy who works hard and is passionate at his career. Anyways, a little after 11 a.m. this morning, he returned from his work-related business trip and caught his 40-year-old wife engaging in sexual intercourse with his 24-year-old travel partner. According to his travel partner, he ran upstairs and retrieved a silver handgun. He ran back down the stairs and, as the travel partner was putting his clothes back on, shot him once in the back. He collapsed and was rushed to the hospital while my friend fled the scene. His wife called the police and gave them his license plate number. He was caught by police entering the highway and charged with attempted murder, fleeing and eluding, aggravated battery, unlawful possession of a handgun, and possession of hollow point ammunition. This is in the state of New Jersey. No word on bail or bond. His wife has denied the cheating and stated he freaked out and got jealous because she was showing hospitality to his friend. Wow, really? No explanation as to exactly why he was over during that time. By the way, also a very completely different story from my best friend's version of events. This is the second time I've had a friend get charged in a domestic situation in recent months. Is there any way he can get out of this? I don't think so. Is there any self-defense clause he can use because, after all, a strange man was in his home, right? Not exactly. I'm looking for advice to give him, but I don't want to steer him wrong. He can make a few phone calls during a very short period in the day but no visitations, which sucks. This is going to be a tough one for your friend. Wife still gets upset over the dumbest thing. Long story short, I've caught my wife cheating via Messenger for the last few years. The worst was last year when she broke her legs and I took care of her. Obviously, by accident that our son asked me to download a game on her phone last year. I decided to check her Messenger and boy, was my heart broken. I dig deeper and it went back to at least 4 years. I confronted her about it and I stupidly believed it was my fault. Fast forward to recently. Everything was pretty cool. Her and my son went back to her family's ranch in San Diego. I had a cool weekend and used my computer to log into Facebook. Somehow it logged into hers. Surprise, I found her doing the same thing around her birthday. Full-on sex pics. I confronted her and she admitted her fault and apologized. Even did everything I said about her having to re-earn my trust. Anyhow, I brought up how I had been feeling still. She calls me, we video chat. I make a comment about how she looks like she's wearing makeup. And also how the light makes it look like she shaved her eyebrows. She immediately went into that fight mode. Red flags. I tried telling her I was just making an observation. But she immediately went into how she's been working hard at the ranch. No time to talk to anyone. I'm just demanding of her what to do. I won't let her shower. And I'm like, hold up. I never said that. My gut tells me she is still up to her no good shenanigans. Any help or advice is welcome. Well, if your gut is telling you that she's up to no good, then she probably is. Wife lies and inappropriate conversations continue. I'm 34, she's 32. Been together almost 11 years. Married almost 5. Long story short, she lives about an hour and a half away from work. She was having inappropriate, mildly conversations with her previous boss and spending time drinking with him. He randomly was in town and they went drinking. Ended up at her place. She called me crying saying he came on to her and was being creepy. She said she made him leave. This was May 2019. I believe this fully. I had no reason to mistrust at this time. After this, she began making major efforts to talk with him more and see him more. Listen guys, from my experience, if a woman thinks a man is creepy, she is not going to make any effort to be with him. She's going to do her best to stay away. She would travel down to my town, go drinking with him and supposedly others, and then come to my apartment to sleep before driving back home for work. Eventually, I picked up on what was happening and went through her phone. I found nothing overtly incriminating, but there was enough to know what was up. I'm unsure they had sex, but they were rather flirty and planning trips to see each other. Pretty sure I caught it before they had sex, but that's irrelevant. After this, she claimed no contact with him. She sent him a message in front of me saying the contact was inappropriate and that she values me and needs to put me first. I had cheated when we first started dating and she gave me a chance, so I felt that she deserved a chance. What kind of relationship is this? We started trying to focus on us more, traveled a bit, and then seemed to fall back into routine. From there, I told her I like to reconcile and make things work for the future. I told her then there is no room for more lies or more inappropriate discussions. She came clean at this point that she had another entanglement. This one I was unaware of and turned out to be highly sexually charged. I do not know if they had sex, but I believe they did. There were many discussions she disclosed about sexting, and specifically a lot revolves around him finishing inside her. She told me all of this and also that she had purchased a remote vibrator for him to use while they were at work. Wow. She claimed she never used it because when they tried, the remote didn't have enough range from his office. I do not believe this. From here I should have left. Yes, you should have. For some reason I felt she'd been honest when I asked her to, and so I should try to see where we could go. This was in December of 2019. Since then, I've caught her talking with him and including sexual innuendos at least 3 or 4 times. She's refused to cut him out because she works with him and can't get another job right now because of the pandemic. She said she just keeps making mistakes and doesn't mean to. Bro, you need to cut her loose. I moved into a new place in June. She and her family came to help, and I later found out she was telling him she wanted to have fun physically and likes it hard via text while sitting having dinner with me and her family. I cannot seem to get myself to pull the trigger on divorce and do not understand why. Well, from my experience and just my opinion, you need to cut this woman loose. Called the police on the ex-wife last night. My ex-wife cheated on me before our wedding 6 years ago. She decided to tell me about it after we got married, and she had continued cheating during that time. To be honest, I am not sure how many times she cheated. I caught her doing things so many times, having physical and emotional affairs with both men and women. The worst part was I kept trying to make it work. We had a daughter together during this time as well. I finally have learned to value myself and not accept cheating in a relationship. There were a multitude of reasons we didn't stay together, such as her being lazy, very unsupportive of my dreams as well. But her cheating drove a wedge between us that couldn't be fixed. Our divorce finalized June 9, 2020. And I have been slowly getting all of our accounts split thanks to COVID-19 for making it take so long. During this time, I've been trying to be respectful and nice. However, over the last 2 days, I found some stuff that really made me mad and broke me down. This was yesterday. I was using the computer and found her search history from the day we filed. She was already living with her adulterer. The things that they looked up were mostly about me and very hurtful. I don't want to get into too much detail, but imagine your biggest flaws. It was a final straw. We had to meet later that day for the last account to be divided, and I couldn't even look at her. She kept probing and confronting me, and told her I didn't want to talk about what was wrong. None of her business. She then proceeded to hit me with text after text saying how good of a person she is and how this really shows my character. I responded with, "Was your actions define your character, and anyone who describes themselves as you have is literally a narcissist." She proceeded to call me nonstop from multiple numbers, and I continuously hung up because I don't owe her anything anymore. And then she showed up at my house uninvited, screaming and knocking on all my windows and doors. She always wants to look for a fight, and I have no more fight left. I called the police, and they basically had to listen to both sides and all but shove her in her car to get her to leave. I heard her screaming to the cops, "I'm a good person. I grow things. I'm a hippie. He's just a coward." The cops proceeded to escort her to leave and told her if she came back that there wouldn't be any talking. This pissed her off royally. Then both cops told me I dodged a bullet by getting out of that relationship. Hearing them say that and watching her drive away was so much satisfaction. And even though she has put me through hell, that satisfaction of having some other normal human making me not feel crazy was humbling. That was so much better than stooping to her level and cheating on her, which I never did. Sometimes the high road can be just as satisfying and you don't have to be going or dragged through the mud. Well, I would say you definitely dodged a bullet. Cheating wife got full custody. Should I use this as an opportunity to start fresh? Age 45. I recently got divorced due to my wife's infidelity, but somehow the court granted her full custody even though I had a noticeably higher income and still made significant time to ensure that my kids, one is 14 and the other is 15, Were happy and fed. Played video games with them, helped them study, worked on building a PC from scratch, go to sporting events, etc. Both flat out said they wanted to be with me rather than my now ex-wife. Never cheated or had any issues, but she was granted full custody. Since my now ex-wife has full custody of the kids, should I use this opportunity to start fresh? In other words, start a new family. Pick up new hobbies. Start a new business. Kids are 14 and 15, meaning that I only have to pay child support for a few years and then I'm free. What's your suggestion? My personal opinion: don't neglect your kids. You don't need to have a relationship with the ex. Maybe somewhat of a relationship because of kids, but don't ever neglect your kids. It may come to bite you in the future if you do that. 27-year-old male caught his wife, 27, sexting 15+ people with explicit images. Some married, also 3 of which go to our gym and 1 is a coach. I caught my 27-year-old wife sexting multiple people on Tumblr last night. We've been married almost 4 years and have been together 8. I've never known or expected her of cheating on me. She told me they were only talking and not exchanging pictures, but they had been talking for a couple of weeks. I was upset and went to bed. I was upset but did not think this was a marriage breaker since we have kids. Her stepkids, my children, and she said she was just wanting attention. I somewhat understood why someone might talk to a stranger, even possibly sext. I've never done this, but we have always been alright with us watching porn. The next day I start digging through all her internet and social media trails. Turns out she has been doing this with 10-15+ men. She said she has no idea how many. It just didn't feel that bad since it was just on the internet. And it turns out this has been going on for 4 months. And she was doing it with a coach at her gym and 2 other guys from her and my gym. And she was talking to them, messaging them up until yesterday. She was sending them explicit pictures and they were sending them back. I saw the pictures. She swears she never did anything with them, and I messaged them, all of them, to try and get some kind of response from them about it. She said she'll even take a lie detector test, and that she never physically cheated on me. She's getting close. And she has offered to delete all social media and give me passwords to her personal stuff. She told me she will never see or talk to them again. She did all of this stuff at a time where she almost died from a blood clot. I was by her side constantly for 2 weeks, and she continued to sext after I constantly took care of her without one complaint. I was just thankful she was alive. I can't believe a word she says cause she seems to keep lying. But she could have told me everything by now. The only reason she stopped is because I caught her. I have no idea what to do right now. I've been thinking of divorce, but it would destroy our family. I have no one to talk to because I am embarrassed about getting completely cuckolded. And I don't want people to think badly of her, and we're getting around to the kids. Please give me some advice, guys who have been through something similar to this before. Well, there's an update to this. People are asking why she did this, and about 4 or 5 months ago she was unhappy with our marriage. Because I became complacent. She made me aware of it, and I have been doing my best to show her more attention. Not get angry with her anymore. She even told me I was so much better and there was no way I'm gonna leave. She said that this is when she started cheating with strangers online. She has been a great wife and friend and is very level-headed. She has raised my children for almost 8 years now. Their mother is pretty much out of the equation. She has been their mother, and my children would be beyond devastated about us divorcing. I really don't know how to get over it. I can't stop thinking about all those pictures and different guys seeing my wife in a way I'm only supposed to. How can I get over this? From my experience, only time can heal these wounds. It's gonna hurt and sting, but you'll get over it in time. I'm 34 and I cannot bring myself to trust my 31-year-old wife. Can't figure this out. It's probably just me. I'm probably being a jerk. I don't think it's my wife's style to talk to me a lot via text when she's going for work. Okay, no big deal, right? Everyone works and some jobs really don't give you the room for that. And like, who cares if she doesn't text you? It doesn't mean anything, right? Except that she sends like a lot of text messages. I don't really know exactly to who though. But I check the phone bills and she texts like 3 to 5 times the amount that I do. Several thousands of messages. We have 2 kids. The kids are great. On the surface, everything is awesome for our family. Decent jobs, cool kids, everything we need. Am I inventing suspicion because I feel guilty and tempted to step out? Probably. I've developed some decent crushes over the years. Why? At least in part to the absences of my wife. Not just the long silences but the abrupt random work hours. long evenings and no real communication around them. If I pry, she gets angry and I can't really deal with her anger. She flares up and things get confusing really fast. So I've kind of split my mind. I've gotten into trouble for hiding stuff I shouldn't have. I am always acting out of fear, hiding from my wife's anger. Sometimes I'm doing dumb shit I shouldn't. Sometimes it's innocent. But she doesn't trust me fully. I've never cheated on her physically. But I've had some close relationships with some women she didn't appreciate or fully knew about. And I still hold on to this instance where she had a sexual relationship with a dude when we were young. We've been together a long time and this was a long time ago. But I feel like it validates that she has the capacity to do it again. Or to have been doing it. I guess we all do. I'm not in a healthy way about any of this. We have tried a few therapists. It's going not great and flares up and it's painful afterwards. Right now I just tell myself, fuck it. I don't concern myself with her hours or the concept of when she'll get home. I increasingly want to snoop, but it's so stressful. She takes this laptop to work I know she doesn't need. I feel like she's hiding something. Or am I super paranoid and guilty? Or all of the above? Or none? My opinion. If your gut is telling you something, then there's probably something not right. I'm 30, but I don't know if I should restart with my now ex-girlfriend. She is 30 as well. After her being physically violent on several occasions. Confused because I've developed a strong bond with her kids. They're both 5 and 6. Please help. I want to start by saying I am absolutely in love with this woman, despite her negative behaviors. But I think that's clouding my judgment. And I could use some advice. I've known her for over 10 years. Called her Vivi. Lost touch with her. Reconnected. The timing was right and fell in love. It was great. Darn near a dream come true. It was romantic, flirty, passionate. And while that was happening, I developed a strong bond with her kids, who didn't have a strong father figure in their life. We dated for almost over a year and a half. It was crazy how good it all felt. She's the one for me. At least, I thought it was. I think we moved too fast. During that period, we both opened up and got comfortable. She had her insecurities. And so did I. Doesn't everyone? But I also did start to notice her verbal abuse. It was light and I brushed it off. Arguments would get a little disrespectful, especially on her part. But I shrugged it off and didn't verbally attack her the same way. That's never cool to do. 5 months ago we agreed to moving in together. And that's when it got way worse on her end. Her verbal abuse got awful. Her guilt trips were used on me frequently. We argued several times a week. I got to a point where I would just say yes to avoid conflict. Meanwhile, the kids and I are doing amazing. They would darn near call me dad by accident. But I never forced them to say anything they didn't want to say. I'd go as far as to say I love these kids like my own. I can't blame her for me using alcohol to escape. But I started drinking more after arguments. And I would just leave her alone. I felt like I needed to just feel something else other than tension and anger. I hate arguing. It leads me to this now. She got crazy physically abusive on several occasions, leaving bruises and scratches on me after heated arguments at night. I never struck her back other than to get her away from me. And for those I feel god-awful doing that to my partner. Cops were never called out of embarrassment. I couldn't speak to anyone. We agreed to figure it out together. Then the second time it happened. And I'm left with more bruises and scratches. And the recent one left more marks on me, as well as damage to my personal property. She moved out and I've since fixed and repaired things that were broken. This happened within 4.5 months. What's broken now is she and I can't sleep without seeing the kids again. I know I miss her and the kids, but I can't figure out if it's love or the abused mentality saying I want to go back. She's willing to work it out, take professional advice and work on herself. And even taking steps to replace any money lost during our time together. So I can see she's trying. And the kids keep wanting to talk to me. But I can't get through a conversation without feeling depressed or afterwards breaking down in tears for them. I feel like I lost my family. I know she's a good one because I've seen it. But I think her domestic violence comes from her past as a child and her previous relationship. Let me give you some advice. You can't fix that. She needs to get help from someone else. Is it dumb to try again with her after all of this? Or am I just feeling the effects of an abused person in an abused relationship with domestic violence? Is this depression? I don't know anything anymore because it doesn't seem real. Advice? Work it out with professional help. Run for the hills. I would say run for the hills. Am I not supportive enough for her to help her through this? I just need help. Well, the only help you can give her is step back and let her get her own help. Professionally. First off, I want to say this is not a story about a cheating wife or cheating girlfriend. This is a crazy story about a guy's girlfriend getting into a fight with his brother over politics. Girlfriend and my brother got into a fist fight over a political argument, and now my family is demanding I break up with her. I introduced my girlfriend to my parents, siblings, and extended family on a family get-together a few days ago. This was the first time I had seen them since the start of the pandemic, and it started out really well with everyone getting along and having fun. That would change as more alcohol was consumed. My girlfriend and brother got into a heated political argument that suddenly escalated to violence, resulting in substantial injuries for both of them. Accounts of who threw the first punch differ, and I frankly don't care as they both actively contributed to the fight and antagonized each other. The fight was eventually broken up, but my girlfriend had the clear advantage. My mom screamed at my girlfriend to leave, so we left. I love both my girlfriend and my brother, and I don't blame either one of them for the fight more than I blame the other. My girlfriend also doesn't seem to hold any grudges, and is embarrassed by her behavior during the incident. My brother and parents, on the other hand, place 100% of the blame on my girlfriend and demand that I break up with her or they will cut all ties with me. I will not do that, but I want to maintain my relationship with my family and somehow get them to accept my girlfriend and that she should not bear all blame for this incident. My brother is also demanding that my girlfriend pay for his alleged medical expenses and is threatening to report her to the police if she refuses. My experience of growing up in this town makes me think sexism in the local police department makes it unlikely that anything would come of that report, as they would almost certainly refuse to consider the possibility that a woman can assault a man. I have offered to pay off my brother, but my girlfriend refuses to let me do that and says that she will pay him if he can prove that the medical expenses are real. My girlfriend still has clearly visible injuries but did not visit the hospital. I suggested that she go to get her injuries documented, but she doesn't want to do that. I just wish everyone could forget about this and move forward, but writing this makes me think my family is acting unreasonably, and perhaps I should just cut contact with them as they are threatening to do with me. Perhaps growing up with these people makes me blind to how ridiculous their behavior is. I don't know what I should do. I think everyone will need some time, or at least make an effort to try to get through it. 27-year-old male thinks his girlfriend, 25, is cheating on him with her manager. Hey y'all, my head is going crazy and I don't know what to think anymore. So I'm hoping someone can steer me in the right direction on if I'm overthinking things, or if what I see is actually true. I've been dating my girlfriend now for 4 years and things are usually great. We rarely argue, enjoy doing the same things, have the same friends. About 2 months ago I noticed she was texting her manager a bunch, which started to raise my suspicion, so I brought it up to her attention and she brushed it off and said don't worry about it, and that her manager is an older guy who she's worked with since she was 17. All of her notifications are turned off on her phone, but I will often quickly glance at who she's texting while it's open. As of this week, the texting has yet to stop, and I finally went through her phone when she was in the shower. I found out they both stop and pick each other up breakfast in the mornings before work. One day she does, one day he does. She just bought a bike last month and he bought her a bicycle seat for it. He constantly asks her to hang out and walk the dogs together, or if she wants to go to events with him. When she's not at work, he texts her saying work is so much better when she's there. And I notice she texts this guy every single day, yet it was the only conversation in the text messages that had the shortest thread, meaning messages were deleted. 2 days ago I sat her down and said I feel like she's cheating on me. I told her I went through her phone and noticed only his messages were deleted and nobody else's were. And her reasoning was that she needed space in her phone. Bullshit. I asked why they pick each other up breakfast when she's not even a breakfast person. And she said they do that to be nice and that she always eats breakfast. I've seen her eat breakfast maybe 10 times. I asked why he bought the bicycle seat for her, and she said he had one laying around so he offered it to her. I asked why the few times they've hung out she always gets dressed up. But when I'm with her she doesn't, and she said she feels comfortable wearing regular clothes when we go out alone. Interesting. After the first sit down she said she went to work the next day, and told her manager they can't text anymore because it's ruining her relationship. Again, I think bullshit. She would never have the balls to say that. She's kind of shy. I wasn't comfortable with her answer, so tonight I sat her down again and said I wasn't comfortable and needed more clarification. I asked her again why did she delete only his messages and nobody else's, and she said because she knew I didn't like him. Once she told me this answer, I said, okay, so why did you lie 2 days ago when I sat you down and asked you this question and answer with a different answer? And she said she doesn't remember what her answer was 2 days ago. I said, how can you not remember the truth? And she started getting mad and asked me what the benefit of staying in a relationship with me while cheating on me would be, and I said I'm not sure. She would have told me. There's so much I can type about this, but it would go on for days. Am I crazy for thinking she's cheating on me? That's a tough one, but if your gut is telling you something, then you. Here is another story that was sent by a listener. This happened to him about 2 years ago, as he says, let's go. I am 51 and my wife is 50. I am a foreman for a large construction company here in North Carolina. And my wife works as a manager for a large clothing store in the mall. I was married for 19 years just 2 years ago. My marriage ended and I walked in on my wife with someone I never knew existed. She never displayed any red flags. I had access to her phone. I had access to her computer and she had access to mine. When she did girls' night, and yes, she did girls' night, but she always had her phone location turned on and always came home at a reasonable hour. I wasn't really big into social media, but she was and used it mostly to advertise discounts at a store. We don't have any kids together, but I have one son from a previous marriage. My first marriage ended because my ex-wife was an undercover meth head, but I quickly recovered from that marriage and moved on with my life. And then I met my current wife at another store she was managing at that time. I struck up a conversation with her, and from then on we started dating right away. And we've been together ever since. About 2 years ago, I came home from work and my wife was already home, which was surprising because I usually got home before she did. But the strange part was she was on the computer. And when I walked through the front door, she quickly closed her PC. Now, in the whole time we have been together, she has never done that, never. But I didn't dwell on it. I just thought it was odd. Fast forward 2 weeks, my wife calls me at work to tell me she is going out with a couple of her girlfriends after work. She has always done this. And I told her I would just see her at home later. She didn't get home until almost 3 a.m. And I let her have it. I was so angry we got into a huge argument and my angry feelings toward her lingered well into the next day. She apologized later and I accepted her apology and didn't think anything else of it. A few weeks later, I was at home just relaxing from work, when my wife comes walking through the door, telling me she had a bad day at work. She had to fire an employee, which upset her. I was sympathetic and just tried to listen as to why she told me the reason she had to fire one of her employees. This woman was actually one of her assistant managers and she had to fill this job rather quickly. Until then, she had to take on her job and told me some days will be way longer than others, to which I told her I understood. Fast forward a couple of weeks and my wife's schedule has changed drastically. She is getting home later from work and seems to be a little stressed when she comes home. I got off work one day a little early and went to the mall where my wife's store is. But by chance, I run into the young woman my wife supposedly fired. I have seen her face in the store at times and made small talk when I was visiting my wife. We started chatting and she tells me that she enjoyed working for my wife, but my wife didn't want to pay her more money. She was essentially doing my wife's job. She told me on a few occasions, my wife left work early to go hang out with her girlfriends. So she gave her a 2-week notice, but then she started giving me certain time frames of when my wife left early to go hang out with her girlfriends. Turns out my wife lied to me each time. Basically, her manager was covering for her. I was surprised she was telling me this, maybe because she had some type of vendetta against my wife, but it caught my attention. After our conversation, I went to my wife's store and didn't tell her the conversation I had with their former employee just around the corner. After hanging out with my wife a bit, I drove home only to be thinking about what this woman told me about my wife leaving her store early and being dishonest about it. Lots of things were going through my mind. Why would she be dishonest like that? Well, when she got home that evening, we had a long sort of heated discussion about those time frames. She basically came back with she didn't want to be out too late, so she had her employee cover for her and she was drunk a few times. That night led to a dead bedroom. As a matter of fact, that dead bedroom lasted a few weeks before I really started to notice a huge shift in my wife's behavior. My wife started going to the gym all of a sudden and she didn't invite me. And I only found out that she had a gym membership because she left work early and one of her employees said that's where she went. It was beginning to feel like my wife was becoming a totally different person. She never kept anything from me, never. Fast forward a few hours, my wife came home from the gym, but she wasn't wearing gym clothes. And I didn't say anything to her about me visiting her store, and me knowing about her new secret gym membership. My wife gets home and doesn't say one word to me, didn't even ask me how my day was, nothing. She just goes to the shower and I am left in the living room, not really sure what is going on. She didn't come back out of the bedroom, but her phone was on the kitchen counter. I picked it up and it immediately asked me for a password. That's when I knew something was up. The fact that she is leaving work early, a sudden gym membership and a password on her phone. She's never had a password on her phone. Fast forward a week and my boss tells me that I need to go to Charlotte for a bit on an upcoming project in that city. He said he will pay me for the travel time, etc. So before I tell my wife, I asked my neighbor, who is an older guy who is retired from General Motors, to keep an eye on the place for a couple of days. He agreed, and for someone in his 70s, he knows his tech. So he gave me some recommendations on some indoor cameras and where to put them. I have always wanted cameras but never got around to installing them. But this was a perfect opportunity to install some since I would be gone for a few days and my wife will be home by herself. Well, that night I told her I will be leaving for a few days. It was a Wednesday night and I would be back Saturday for sure. Then she says to me, "Why are you leaving to go bid on a job?" I said, "My boss doesn't have anybody else to do it besides him, but he is already bidding on another job." Mid-morning I leave for Charlotte. My wife had already left for work, and it takes me about 3 hours to get to Charlotte. When I got there, went to the hotel, checked in and sent my wife a text to let her know I made it there. It was strange. She was giving me a play-by-play of her every move, but she didn't know I had cameras outside and inside, including the bedroom. My wife and I texted each other for most of the night and even FaceTimed each other. The cameras didn't show anything, but she was on her phone quite a bit and moving around the house, but nothing suspicious. At 11 a.m., I get an emergency phone call from my boss. He needed me back because another one of the workers had an emergency at home. So I told him I could be back as early as this evening. I did not tell my wife I was coming back a day early. I would be getting back early enough to take her out to a nice restaurant. So I head back home, and when I get there, it's just getting dark. My neighbor's car is gone. His house is dark, but I can see from a distance, there is a car in my driveway parked behind my wife's car. I stopped. I didn't pull all the way up. I parked a few hundred yards away from the house. I went to the side door of the garage, used my key and opened the door gently. And when I went into the garage, there it was, a man's voice in my house, laughing with my wife. I waited, grabbed the axe that was right next to the door. There were a few minutes of silence. Then I hear them walk upstairs to the bedroom. When I heard them make it to the bedroom, I opened the door to the inside of the house, take off my shoes and walk up the stairs. My heart is pounding and all of a sudden they both start making sounds. The door to the bedroom is open. I peeked my head around and there they were having sex. I stood there for a good 60 seconds before the guy noticed I was there. He says, "Oh shit." My wife screams. I am not a small guy. I am 6 feet 2 inches, 250 pounds and a little overweight. This guy wasn't going anywhere, at least at the moment he wasn't. My wife is saying, "Please, please." At that moment I raised the axe I have in my hand and told them both, "Get the fuck out." When they left, I just sat on the couch, just in a daze of what happened. Once I was able to calm down, my wife starts blowing up my phone and I blocked her. I called my brother and told him what happened. He was at my place within 30 minutes. My brother said to me, "Let's get you out of here." I packed a few things and went to stay at my brother's place. Then my wife started calling my brother, but he ignored her calls. The next morning I go to work and spill my guts to my boss. He was floored and told me if I can't work, he would understand. I told him I could work, but would need some time to take care of this mess legally. Fast forward a week, I gathered the footage from the cameras, hired an attorney and my wife was served at the house. I have not seen her since that night. 2 months later, at the divorce hearing, my wife had an attorney and their attorney was trying to get alimony out of me, as well as trying to get the house to herself. But the judge said that based on the evidence in front of her, she forfeited that with her infidelity. The judge called it marital misconduct. I have never even heard of it. After everything was said and done, she did not get any alimony. She didn't get any of my retirement, but she will get half of the assets we own in the house and about 20% of the equity in the house when it's sold. Unfortunately, the judge allowed her to stay in the house. I told the judge I didn't want to stay there. I had a place to go. About 4 months later, the house was sold. I took my material belongings and she took hers. I have never seen or heard from my ex-wife since the divorce hearing. My brother said he was at the mall one day, walked by her store, and my ex-wife was talking to a customer. She sent me a letter one day to my brother's place. He called me and told me I told him to tear it up and throw it in the trash. It's been 2 years since that happened and I am still torn up about it. I am surprised I let that guy walk out, but Reddit relationship advice. Caught my wife cheating with her boss. Hey guys, this will be quite a big post. I feel like I need an outlet on everything that has happened and hope to find some positives from it. Background. My wife and I have been married for 4 years and together for a total of 10 years. We both met through our professions and fell in love. From both accounts, we've had an incredible time together with very few arguments. I would say less than 5 to 6 in that whole time. My wife and I are both super active and took a huge interest in this together, which built our relationship to being really strong. 3 years ago, our daughter was born and we bought our first place. Things couldn't have looked any better. My wife took a year off work and spoke to me about loving being a mother and considering having a second, which was a total no-go before. She only wanted one. My wife and I decided she would go back to work part-time to spend more time at home with my daughter. She was happy with this. My wife continued to go to work part-time, but she was unsettled at her workplace and believed she had so much more to offer than the position she was in. Around a year ago, my wife applied for a very senior role at a new company. I encouraged her to look outside and go for it. My wife is very intelligent but didn't have the full credentials for this job she was applying for on paper. I told her if she can get an interview, that's all she will need to shine. She ended up getting an interview and subsequently won the job. Her package basically doubled what she was on. However, she would now be working 5 days a week instead of 4 days one week and 3 days the following week, part-time hours. As a condition of that 5-day-a-week job, one of those days must incorporate Saturdays. My wife and I went from being off 3 to 4 days a week together to 1 day a week. I worked 10-hour days 4 days a week. We both discussed this at the time and thought we could get through it as it involved a substantial increase in salary, and I would stay where I was to look after our daughter more. During the first 3 months of her new job, a member of the team decided to leave, leaving her in charge of basically 2 roles. Her job became super busy and she was constantly working back an hour or so a night and was shifting through work emails when she got home. I supported her where I could, but I could tell she was busy. During this time, I was having a really emotionally draining time at my work, and I came home a few times to try to vent to her about it. I could tell she had other things on her mind, and she would basically just shrug me off. I felt deeply hurt with this, and I would effectively just stonewall any further conversations regarding my feelings, and thought I would just keep them to myself. Worst possible thing you can do. My wife approached me in February and said that she is frustrated that I wasn't helping around the house as much as she is working a lot. She had a fair point and I understood her. I asked her if she still loved me during that conversation, and she said yes, of course. I thought this was just a conversation you have when you are a bit angry at work and push it off onto your husband. I began helping with cooking for a few weeks but fell back into not helping as much. I still looked after my daughter, cleaned the house, etc. She's always said I am an excellent father, but I just got slack again and stopped cooking. I ended up buying myself a new computer and getting into video games at night because I felt like that was an escape from reality for me. My wife used to ask me to come to bed, and I would say I don't feel like it and I want to stay up. This lasted for a few months before it stopped. Knowing now, that was a huge sign of disconnect. In early September, I noticed my wife was super distant. I would talk about future plans or trips, and she would say don't book it as she doesn't feel like going. I thought that was a bit strange but didn't think too much into it. Sex leading up to the week before D-Day was drying up, and she would always make an excuse not to have it. I remember a few days before D-Day we had sex, and it felt so uncomfortable, like she didn't want to be there. I knew something was up. A few days later we were in the kitchen, and I could definitely see something was wrong. I asked her if she was okay and she just said yes, fine. I kept probing and she looked at me and said, "I'm not happy anymore, I don't love you." It was at that stage that my whole world I had built with her just shattered. I cried uncontrollably and we went for a drive. I was in a state of total shock. How can it feel so good and then a week before D-Day it doesn't feel right and she says this? I just didn't understand. My wife and I spoke in the car, away from our daughter for a few hours, and she was quite cold about it. She said that she feels like we have grown apart, we are distant, and it feels like we are roommates. She stated that she doesn't think I'm emotionally intelligent enough. She blamed my playing of the computer to be the main reason. I tried to understand her point of view on everything she said, and I definitely could see that it could feel the way it does. I pleaded for her to see a therapist, and she agreed reluctantly. She stated she wanted to make it work for our daughter. I was happy with this, as at least it's something. I sat back and had a huge self-reflection on myself, and thought this isn't the person who I am, and it's definitely not the person I want to be. Having heard my wife say she doesn't love me anymore was the most painful experience of my life. I cherish my wife and my daughter more than anything on this planet. For the next 6 weeks I began my growth as a man and really stepped up. I was cooking nearly every day, keeping the house spotless, completely stopped all social media as I knew this was just pointless scrolling through other people's lives, and began reading a book a day, everything you can imagine on mindfulness, gratitude, love, marriage, and everything in between. I began to really see how a marriage needs work all the time, and being present in the moment is something I wasn't doing for 4 to 5 months. I understood how you can become comfortable and complacent in your marriage and forget about date nights and time together is so important. I began to actively listen to my wife, and I was beginning to read her better than I have ever before. I was falling further in love with her during this process, even though she wasn't giving me much back. I noticed it was strange that she wouldn't give me any appreciation for anything I do the majority of the time. I wasn't expecting it, but I thought it was weird she wasn't giving anything. It felt like I was going around in circles, and I tried even harder to get any recognition I could. She would constantly tell me it feels like I'm smothering her with everything I'm doing. I turned it back a few notches, but noticed she would get distant even more, so I started doing more things again to help. I wrote her a love letter and left it on the kitchen counter so she saw it when I was at work. It was really nice with some touching information about how we met, etc., and it was something I don't usually do but really wanted to. I received a text from her a few hours later that read, "I received your letter. Thank you. X." I couldn't believe how cold and callous that was. It was like a reply you give to a work colleague, not your husband and best friend of 9.5 years. My wife and I began seeing a counselor, both together and individually. My counselor of 30 years was shocked with the progress I was making in such a short period of time, and really saw how much I was growing as a man. My wife also saw it but didn't really note it. During the 6-week period, I noticed my wife was becoming obsessive with her phone. It would be face down wherever she goes, and she would take it with her anywhere in the house. I began to get really suspicious as I knew this wasn't her at all. One day I observed a message from her boss come through on WhatsApp, while she was showing me a video on the phone. My wife must have messaged him and said, "I'll give you a call later," and he replied with a thumbs up emoji. She flicked the message away really quick, which I thought was odd. About 15 minutes later I was standing near her, and observed her WhatsApp recent contact conversations, and didn't see her boss's name on there. She must have deleted it. I began adding things up more and more. I would notice my wife and I really connecting for a few days while we were at home, and then she would go for a run with her boss after work, and she would come back being really distant and cold. She put it down to good days and bad days, but I knew something was off. One day she was going to have a shower, and I saw her plug her phone on charge and turn her phone off while she was in the shower. Once she got out of the shower, she picked up her phone and said, "Oh, my phone must have automatically turned off." I knew she was lying. I confronted her in the kitchen of our house about this, and she went completely white like she saw a ghost. She sat stunned for a few seconds and said, "I turned it off as I didn't want you to see the messages to my best friend about us." This best friend I knew that she was close to. I don't know why, but my gut was telling me her facial expressions didn't add up to the crime. But I asked her flat out if she's having an affair, and she completely denied it. 2 days before D-Day, my wife invited me to a black tie work dinner which included some really high-profile people. She told me she wanted me to see her work, and to see what it's all about. I have been asking for an invite to one of these events for a long time, and finally got one. I was excited. My wife told me that we shouldn't be physical at the event as it's a black tie, and was inappropriate. I chalked this up as not wanting to look unprofessional, and as we were having problems, I understood her predicament. A day before D-Day, my wife and I attended the black tie dinner. I was seated on a table with most of her colleagues who she introduced to me. I noticed her boss was seated on another table, and I found it strange that she didn't introduce me as they go for runs together once a week, and she talks about him infrequently at home. While the presentations were on, I noticed my wife was constantly looking over her shoulder trying to make eye contact with her boss. It was persistent and reminded me of what I did when I first met my wife. It's that first part of the love process which you are infatuated with each other. I looked at her boss out the corner of my eye and noticed him doing the same thing. When he made eye contact with her, he made eye contact with me and looked away really fast. My wife would then look at me and ask if my dinner was okay. I knew this was a sign of guilt, and something was going on. I continued with the night, not wanting to spoil it in front of her colleagues. At the conclusion of the dinner on the way home, I put it on my wife that something wasn't right with her boss. She didn't deny anything emphatically straight away, which made me even more sure. She just said, "I'm seeing things." I went home and explained I think she's having an emotional affair or more with her boss. She said that she enjoyed his company and that she likes and cares for him, but tried to play dumb and say, "What's an emotional affair?" I knew my wife was intelligent and she knew what that was. We finished the night talking. D-Day next day she went to work. When she was about to finish work, she messaged me saying she's going to go have a few drinks after work with her work colleagues. She had began doing this a lot in the last 6 months, which is totally out of character. My daughter was constantly saying, "Mommy not coming home" or "Mommy at work." She was noticing it and she wasn't even 3 yet. Anyway, my wife said she was going to have a drink or two, and then come home quickly. I said, "Sure, go ahead." My wife ended up coming home 4 hours later, and told me she had a good time before hitting the showers. I asked her who she was out with and she told me about 3 to 4 colleagues and her boss. I thought that was so strange she would go out with him in a group setting after I just told her what I suspected. While she was in the shower, I checked her phone. I noticed that there was no conversation with her boss. However, she had a message she had written to her boss that she hadn't sent yet, which read, "I love you too. I just know you're not in a great spot." My whole world just collapsed. My wife was telling her boss she loved him. I just couldn't believe it. The last 6 weeks since she told me she doesn't love me, I was doing so much stuff right, and she was just luring me on, knowing she is falling in love with someone else. I always thought everything I was doing was falling on deaf ears, which was so surprising, as she said if I made these changes in February when had the discussion that she would be more in love with me now. I confronted her about it, and she was just expressionless. The first thing she could say was, "Why are you going through my phone?" I was so stunned. I just didn't know how to comprehend my feelings. I was pacing up and down the house and firing questions at her left, right, and center. My wife told me it was an emotional connection only, and was happening for around 3 months. My wife knew if the relationship came out, she would lose her job at work as it's a massive conflict of interest, but she continued anyway. I told her to get out that night, and she left for her friends. I was still trying to process everything. How can she do this to me? How can you do this to anyone? We've had 9 beautiful years without any troubles and you do this? I'm at home minding your daughter while you progress your career, and you just shit on me? I was struggling big time. My emotions were running high, but I knew I still loved her so much. I knew the person she became in the last 3 to 4 months was not the person who she was. My wife has never been a liar, deceitful, or liked going out drinking after work. Her boss had taken advantage of her vulnerabilities and told her what she wanted to hear while she wasn't getting that emotion met at home. For the next few days I was devastated and hurt, but I knew I wanted it to work not only for my daughter, but for everything we had built together over 10 years. I also knew the person she turned her into wasn't the person she was. I took my wedding band off and she noticed. I told her I took it off as you hurt me, and it didn't feel like the ring meant anything right now. My wife was still wearing her rings and through guilt, took hers off the next day, and put them in her bedside drawer. We talked a lot, and she told me that she hated herself for doing what she did and felt disgusted she could tell someone she's only had an emotional connection with that she loved them. I told her everything he was telling you is infatuation and not love. He was telling you what you wanted to hear when you were missing it at home. She kept asking me if I understood how it got to this point, and I would get really angry at it. I told her I understood how it can be a perfect storm of a number of things, but I'll never justify what you did. My wife and I didn't get much sleep in the next few days. I was at home looking after our daughter, and she was sleeping on a friend's couch. 4 days after D-Day and my wife came home, and we had a long conversation. She was totally exhausted and looked like death. I told her to sleep in our bed tonight, and I would sleep on the couch so she can get some sleep. She agreed. Before she went to bed, my wife continued with the apologies and said she needs to know in herself why she did what she did. I told her that people make mistakes, although I can't ever justify what you have done, and my trust with you has been torn to shreds. People do make mistakes. We are not perfect. My wife said she had stopped all text and phone conversation with her boss, and is only seeing him at work on a professional level when she is too with other colleagues, so maybe twice a week for 10 to 15 minutes. My wife said she is still confused with her feelings, and has felt overwhelmed the last 7 weeks. I told her that's because she has been emotionally connecting with her boss outside the marriage, and then coming home and seeing her husband make huge improvements but not giving him any credit for it. I told her I can imagine how mentally draining that is. My wife explained to me that she was happy with our life before she had this affair, but wondered if she was truly happy. She told me for once she put herself first, and that's part of the reason she did this. I told her that she has always put others before herself since I've known her, and that she does this because that's what makes her happy. I said, as soon as you put yourself first in front of everything else, look what has happened. You've lost all your core beliefs and morals, and had an affair with someone. I told her that she is doing exactly what her mother did to her father 4 years earlier. During that time, she told me she couldn't believe what her mother did, and that she never wants to be her mom, and here we are. A few days later, my wife came around before I got home, and took our daughter out for dinner. I got home, and I noticed her rings were not in the drawer where they have been sitting for a few days, and I thought she must have them on. She got home a bit later, and I noticed her rings were on. When she wasn't around my daughter, I told her it was nice she has her rings back on, and she looked at me and smiled and said, "You don't have yours on." I took this as a good sign that the few days away was affecting her, and she was starting to realize what she had done. I went out to play some squash and came back a few hours later. I hugged her and then looked her in the eyes and said, "I love you." Before I could say anything else, she said, "I love you too." For the first time, I felt it was genuine. Whenever I said this in the past, she wouldn't reply, or she would say, "You know I care for you." This signified a positive step forward. We sat down and I just listened to her. She told me she looked at a few places to stay for a bit longer to clear her head, but was upset at how crappy they were and that home was comfortable. My wife indicated she needed space for 3 to 4 weeks to evaluate everything that she has done without having everyone in her ear. My wife has always been a person that likes her own space to think, and I could clearly see she was getting bombarded from our close family, myself and her friends. My wife said she needed time to see why her feelings for her boss were strong, and if it was infatuation, or was it something more. I agreed that time apart would be good. Even though I still love her so much, I wanted her to have a clear mind before we move forward with the marriage. I want her to realize that the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and that what she had at home, a family, means more to her than an emotional affair with her boss. Although we had some times at the beginning of the year that was difficult in our marriage, I have grown as a man, and understand the role I played and learned how much communication is key to everything, especially talking on a deeper level. I also understand that being present in the moment and grateful for what you have is hugely important. Becoming complacent in your marriage or life is a killer, and I realize that I never want to do that again. The next day, my wife organized an apartment to stay in for 4 weeks. We both agreed we would talk to each other throughout, and our daughter would stay with her on a few occasions. My wife would come over a few nights a week for dinner, and we would take our daughter out for family time together as well. I wanted to keep normality with my daughter as much as I can, and she did too. Although I am devastated that my wife will be away for 4 weeks and I don't know what the future is going to hold, I know it's a process that must take its course, as we were constantly talking about it at home, and it was becoming overwhelming for both of us. I don't think we could have worked through this in a home environment without her evaluating the situation alone. It feels so weird that I'm fighting for my wife after what she has put me through the last 7 to 8 weeks, but I cling to hope that the week or so during that time we were connecting a lot. When the boss wasn't messaging her, I could see my old wife was back, and everything felt normal. I guess I came to this sub to see if anyone had similar situations to me, and what I can do to try and make it work. At the end of the day, she will make the final decision whether she believes the marriage for 9 years and what we built is worth another crack. I just feel ashamed that I don't feel angrier for what she has done, but I feel like I've grown so much to realize that it wasn't who she is. Is there anything that I can do to help repair this situation, or do I need